Hi, this is Dr. Brandy Maynard, and my goal is to make you shine. Today's topic is creating engaging training experiences using a training framework that's grounded in accelerated learning principles. Do you remember what it was like when you were first learning to drive? You may have cautiously entered the driver's side door, slid into the seat, buckled up, and wiped the sweat from your palms as your mom or dad nervously sat next to you in the passenger seat, wondering what was about to happen. Perhaps your experience was entirely different. Maybe you threw open the driver's side door, cranked up the tunes, put the pedal to the metal, and shouted, "Eat my dust!" to anyone who could hear. I personally threw gravel from the tires on my first drive because I hadn't yet gauged the finesse it took to step on the gas in a very dignified manner. When you were first learning to drive, every move was measured and calculated. Compared to that recent drive you took, I probably drove 20 miles last weekend without any memory of any technical aspects of that trip because driving has become second nature to me. Highway hypnosis, also known as white line fever, is a mental state in which a person can drive great distances responding to external events in a safe, expected, and correct manner, with no recollection of having consciously done so. I know you've all experienced this. All experienced drivers have. Everybody has strengths and areas of opportunity. When you think about planning and leading a professional development, reflect on where you might place yourself inside this bullseye. Does the thought of planning and leading a professional development put you in the panic zone, where your palms are sweaty and you'd much rather be anywhere else but in front of this group of people? Perhaps you're more in the learning zone. For those of you who've driven in the snow, think about a moment for the first time that you experienced an uncontrolled skid. For me, I was a young teacher driving to school on icy roads. I thought I would give myself plenty of time to stop, but I didn't. I slammed on my brakes and I continued to slide until I rear-ended the car in front of me. It's a gut reaction to slam on the brakes. As a more experienced driver, I've come to realize that slamming on my brakes is the worst thing I could possibly do on slick roads. Although the lesson was in front of me, literally in this case, it took repeated practice to understand how to come to a stop in icy winter driving conditions. In that moment, I was in panic mode. It wasn't until I was in an empty parking lot later that evening with my husband next to me that I was able to perfect my stops on black ice with just-in-time coaching and lots of feedback. For those of you in the education field, this is known as the zone of proximal development, a theory coined by Vygotsky, and is defined as tasks a participant can perform with the help and guidance of others, but cannot perform independently. I'm happy to report that I'm currently in the comfort zone when driving in slick winter conditions. With repeated practice and the natural feedback loop that one receives when driving in these conditions, I personally have perfected the art of coming to a safe stop in slick conditions. Granted, sometimes that means running my car into a snowbank, but we'll save that story for another day. Knowing what you know now about the zone of proximal development, where do you fall in the bullseye when it comes to planning and delivering professional development? When I say pause, please answer the following question. What problems would you face if you didn't plan engaging professional development opportunities? Pause. Thanks for thinking through that question. When I've asked this to people in the past, common answers included people wouldn't show up for my training. If they did show up, they'd be completely unengaged. Training would not seem as like a valuable investment to my company, and worst case scenario, my training could be seen as a complete waste of time and money, and I would be out of a job. These are all problems that I want to save you from facing. In a moment, when I say pause, go ahead and pause this video and answer the following questions. Imagine the year is 2025, and you're on the cover of Training Magazine as the organization who leads the top training program in the country. What words would people use to describe your learning experience? Pause. Let's go back for a minute to the driving example. Let's begin with the car keys. In order to begin a training opportunity, we need the keys, or in this case, the training outcomes. There are 3 standard questions I ask myself when designing training. What is the desired outcome? What actions need to be achieved to demonstrate success? And why is success important? Here is the objective for today's session. Participants will be able to effectively use the training framework to create engaging professional development opportunities for teachers that ensure they transfer what they learn into their work with students. Participants have one looming question in their mind. What's in it for me? Good trainers always answer that question, and they do it with the participants' own words. What? Let me share a little secret with you. You can find out the WIFM factor, what's in it for me, by framing the question in the way I framed it to you at the top of the session. I asked you what problems you would face if you didn't create engaging training. That question led you to think of all the problems you might face if you did not create engaging learning opportunities for your learners. Voila, the WIFM is born. Now for the super secret training move. Take the words of your participants and use those words in your training. It will instantly hook them and make them wonder where you've been all their lives. From my experience, I knew when I posed the question to you around what makes world-class training and professional development that you would mention a high level of engagement, so I included that in my title, as well as throughout this webinar. When preparing for a live event, if you have access to a variety of stakeholders before the session, ask them what they want the participants to be able to do after the session. That's how you hook them. When you write training objectives, consider all of your stakeholders. Obviously, it's the participants themselves, but it also goes deeper than that. Stakeholders are the people that the participants serve, as well as the people who they report to. Stakeholders are anybody with sweat in the game. We have turned the key, and now it's time to press in the clutch before shifting to first gear. Communication is key in this process, and it's your responsibility as the facilitator to get the why across to your participants. Remember, to be effective, the why must come directly from your participants. If you're using pre-work, you can gather the why from your pre-work. If you know your participants, the why can be embedded within that pre-work. It's important to remember, if you choose to include pre-work, be sure and respond to the pre-work personally before meeting with your participants in the online learning space. This shows you care about the pre-work and about their learning experience. When I schedule a face-to-face event, I make sure to pitch the why well in advance of that event. I use an online newsletter tool called a S'more to get the what's in it for me across to my participants. I outline expectations for the upcoming training, and I get their full buy-in on the process. We even go as far as holding a 1-hour kickoff meeting prior to the face-to-face event to introduce participants to one another, if it's an intimate gathering, or to go over our norms and answer any questions the group might have prior to the event. I recommend you try some or all of these suggestions when designing professional development, both online and face-to-face. Okay, drivers, press in the clutch and pause. We've created a sense of community among our school leaders by creating a visual directory. Using the S'more tool that I told you about moments ago, I created a visual directory with pictures, contact information, and the strengths of each school leader. We believe in a strong sense of collaboration, and that can only occur when people know who that they can go to in order to ask for help. We believe this is done by highlighting strengths each person possesses. You may want to use this format to create a directory for your own staff. It's also a welcome resource for new people within the organization. Let me tell you why we call out a leader's strengths. We believe in strength-based leadership. Think about it like this. If you lead from a position of strength, you're always going to be on the cusp of greatness. You're going to continue to push forward in areas where you're already strong, making you stronger than your competition. If you lead from a position of always trying to be better at your weaknesses, you're going to fall behind the pack, and you will never have the leading edge that you would naturally have when taking a strengths-based approach. The most effective leaders are always investing in their strengths, and they surround themselves with the right people who understand the strengths of those around them. Everyone has strengths, and when those strengths are leveraged, they understand their own strengths and the needs of their followers. If you want to research more about strengths-based leadership, check out Strengths Finders and Strengths-Based Leadership by Tom Rath and Barry Conchie. Let's take a look at the 5 gears within the training framework. You've already experienced the beginning of the ride, and you may not have even realized it. And I'm not talking about highway hypnosis. We began by reminding you of what it was like when you first learned to drive. This created the scaffolding needed to begin to hang some new learning and some new concepts to what you already know. After that engagement through storytelling, I shifted into 2nd gear and asked you to share with me where you fell in the zone of proximal development. For those of you in the education world, again, this was something familiar. I realize that this may not have been familiar to everyone, so I connect it to driving on slick roads, another storytelling opportunity. Since some of us are not yet friends, we will be someday, I continue to dive deeper into the WIFM factor by asking you to outline ideas for world-class training. This will serve me well, and as I close out this session and share with you some best practices, you'll see how those ideas resurface. We moved into the teach and train stage when I shared the questions, and then I asked you to write some training objectives and how you might pitch the training prior to the event. If this were a synchronous training session, I'd ask you to write down your training objectives and your WIFM problem statements, and I'd give you immediate feedback through partner sharing and fishbowl feedback, where we would take several examples and I would help you rework them until they shine. That would allow you to move into the next gear where you will apply what you learn. I cannot stress the importance of observation feedback in this stage. The greatest learning occurs when participants do real-world work with authentic practice and feedback. The apply phase is vitally important. I am modeling experience before label with this behind-the-scenes walkthrough of the framework. You experienced the process, and now I'm sharing the reason behind this purposeful planning. I think you would agree that this really makes the content come to life when the trainer does this. Reflection occurs when the learning is finished and is the most important step of the process. I'm willing to bet you didn't think I would say that. Reflection allows the participants to make the learning their own, volley ideas back and forth with one another, and ultimately decide what they're going to do with this new information. Let's look at each step in the framework one final time, and I will share with you 1 or 2 tools that I use during each step in the process. I urge you to pause the webinar and come up with at least 1 or 2 ideas of your own. First gear begins by engaging the participant in the learning process and immersing them with an experience before labeling the content. Answer Garden is my favorite tool for this, and you can find it at answergarden.ch. I may start by asking participants, what problems would you face if, and leaving space for them to answer this question within the Answer Garden tool. This tool gives me the option of exporting the information to a word cloud so I can capture the words on one slide, and the size will show me the frequency of the answer, quickly giving me a visual of their needs. Second gear provides an experience for them to actively interact with the content. This is through immersion. This is an excellent place to do a think, pair, share activity. The facilitator poses a question, gives participants a few minutes to think of their response, and then asks them to share their thoughts with a partner and potentially with the whole group. It's important that you pose a question to have them interact with the content. This interaction might be emotional, it could be brief, or it might even be in depth. Have them think about how they might answer that question and then share it out with others. This technique works nicely in a virtual space as well. If you choose to do a think, pair, share activity virtually, I'd recommend putting participants into individual breakout rooms or pairing them up with someone via chat and chatting ideas back and forth for a set period of time. Third gear provides you an opportunity to teach and train concepts your participants need in order to succeed, tying the experience directly to what they learned in step 2, immersion. I have a couple examples in this stage. The first is a jigsaw method. In the jigsaw, students work in small groups to develop knowledge about a particular topic and develop an effective way to teach it to others. These expert groups then break up and create new jigsaw groups, each containing 1 expert participant. The expert participant of each topic assumes the teacher role and teaches the respective topic to the other group members of the jigsaw group. The second method is a fishbowl method. The outer circle of participants sit around a smaller inner circle of participants. The students in the inner circle are challenged to engage in in-depth discussions with the students in the outer circle, observing and listening to the discussion, critiquing the content, logic, and the group interactions. Fishbowl can also be useful in discussion structuring online classes, creating virtual inner and outer circles within the synchronous classroom. In fourth gear, the facilitator invites participants to demonstrate their understanding of concepts with application learning. This is where real work and responsibility take flight. Think about this as a test drive. I like to use the role play technique. Participants assume characters or identities that they wouldn't normally assume in order to achieve the learning goal. Role-playing is an example of learning by doing, and it requires the participants to actively apply knowledge, skills, and understanding to the workplace scenario. As mentioned before, it's very appropriate for the facilitator to coach participants during this phase and give bite-sized feedback so they can improve their practice. In fifth gear, participants are encouraged to reflect, share, review, and make the information their own. One of my favorite technology tools is Kahoot. This app offers a game show-like experience where the group can show what they know. This free tool makes it fun to learn and review any subject material. The training comes to a close, and you need to make sure that what was taught was actually internalized and will make a difference in the person's knowledge and skill in the workplace. We do this by asking each leader to create an individualized development plan, outlining goals for themselves in an area of strength, something that they're extremely good at, an area of opportunity or growth, an area that they need to grow in, and finally, an outcome that's important to the company. I would recommend encouraging leaders to create stretch goals. Google describes why stretch goals are important. They say more often than not, daring goals can tend to attract the best people and create the most exciting work environments. Stretch goals are building blocks for remarkable achievement in the long term. Google actually gives their employees what's known as 20% time. 1/5 of their work week, perhaps the entire day on Friday, can be used to work on projects that they're passionate about. That's how Gmail was born. As supervisors, you want to look for changes in a person's practice after attending the training, and you want to acknowledge these changes. We actually ask each person to fill out a survey after they're done with the learning experience. In this survey, we ask 3 questions. 1, what did you learn? 2, how can you apply what you learned to your work? And finally, how can I best support you in order for you to be successful? This ongoing coaching and development after training is what makes the training experience lasting and extremely valuable to our participants. In my 20+ years in the field, I've learned some very important lessons around this framework and also some important things in adult learning. Around the framework, I learned that experience before label. You really want to give your learners and your participants an experience before you begin to label the learning. You want your participants to have opportunities to discover the learning. You don't want to feed it to them. You want them to discover it. You want them to make it their own. You want to provide opportunities to practice, again, with feedback. That practice and feedback is vital in their growth and development. The cycle is woven through each segment of the agenda. So if you begin at the beginning of the day with an opening activity, and then you move into the first topic of the day, you would go through the complete cycle from beginning to end in that 45-minute to 90-minute block. Then you would take a break. Make sure that you leave ample opportunity for the break. I like to break for a minimum of 15 minutes, more like 30 minutes, making sure that you provide hydration and healthy snacks. And then you come back to that second section of the day, maybe from 10:30 to 11:30 or 12 o'clock. Again, the cycle begins again, where you engage and then you move through the cycle all the way to evaluate. It's cyclic. It happens throughout the day. And again, you want to provide ample opportunity to reflect. If you've done an activity and you have spent 20 minutes on that activity, I would give at least 10 minutes on the reflection piece. 20 would be an optimal reflection, but 10 to 20 minutes would be ample opportunity to reflect. I want to also tell you some ideas and some things I've learned about adult learning. First, tell them why the learning is important and use their words to convey that message. They told you when you asked them that question in the beginning, what problems would occur if, and then you asked if you didn't provide engaging opportunities for learning. Use those words that they gave you to tell them why that learning is important. Adults also appreciate choice. Give them choice throughout the day. Give them choice moment by moment. Don't go any longer than 7 minutes before they're actively involved, and have a choice in whether or not they are going to do an activity or not do an activity, whether or not they're going to do it in the way that you've laid it out, or maybe they want to take the learning on their own and do it in a way that's more meaningful for them. Allow that level of choice. Connect the learning opportunities to their work. Don't do it in isolation. Don't create silos, folks. Give them an opportunity to connect with their learning directly to their work. Again, that goes back to why the learning is important, and it will connect to their WIFM. The brain craves active learning opportunities. Give them lots of opportunity to be active. Again, at least every 7 minutes. If you can do it more, that's amazing. And finally, the brain needs breaks between learning and, as I mentioned earlier, a healthy snack. So think about how you can provide healthy snacks, how you can provide brain breaks, how you can provide opportunities for them to collaborate and connect with one another and really make your learning opportunities exciting, engaging, and impactful. There are several things I do to make the learning atmosphere special, and one that my participants will always remember. The first thing I do is purchase Bear books and markers. These Bear books can be found at bearbooks.com, and they are just landscape books that have blank pages in between, and I also provide Pentel markers. There's just something special about holding that Pentel marker. I have colorful cups in the middle of each table with a wide variety of colors, and I encourage my participants to mind map and to get their ideas out using words and pictures. They do that. They love the markers, they love the book, and it's something that they go home with. Oftentimes, I may even throw in a little challenge where they can design a beautiful cover for the front of their books, and that becomes a piece of the learning as well. The second thing that I have purchased is something called a debrief thumb ball. And the way that a thumb ball works is that you create a circle. And if you've got a lot of people, I say any more than 12, I usually break the circle up. So I have small groups of 12 or fewer if I can. And I have several balls that I bring along with me. But these debrief balls have very specific debrief questions. I begin by throwing the ball up, and underneath my right thumb is the question that I answer. So for instance, one of the questions might be, what was hard for you to hear today? As the leader, I be as transparent and authentic as I can, because the quality of my answer is going to set the tone for the quality of the other 11 participants in the circle. And then I choose to throw the ball to anybody in the circle. They grab the ball, they look underneath their right finger, and they answer the question. Once they've done that, a little helpful hint is to have them put their hands behind them. So if somebody's hands are in front of them, it means that they need the ball. If their hands are behind them, it means that they've already answered the question. Great way to debrief at the end of each segment or at the end of the day. We tend to do it at the end of the day. This one is kind of surprising to folks, but I have a budget for fresh flowers. There's something about having a vase or a potted plant on each table that really brightens up the room. So I make sure that I have fresh flowers at every event. And finally, music. If I have an incoming music that gets people energized, a song that they recognize each time that we bring the group back together. They know that that song means that we're coming back together. I also use music like Yanni and some other artists that don't have words in their music to do the reflection sections. So I use music without words for the reflection section, and then I also use music to pump up the excitement, to lower the room when I need to do that, to open and close activities. I use Spotify. We have different playlists for different areas. If we're training in Vegas, we might have Viva Las Vegas. If we are training in California, we might be playing California Girls. It just depends. But that music is really, really important. How did we do, folks? We set the learning objective that you would be able to effectively use the training framework to create an engaging professional development opportunity for teachers that ensure that they transfer what they learn into their work with students. Think about at least one way that you're going to use what you learned today to change the way that you develop professional development for your teachers or leaders in the future. I challenge you to write that down. I also challenge you to share that with an accountability partner. We like to call it an accountability buddy. Somebody who can hold you to that challenge and somebody who can coach you to help you take that challenge to the next level. Check in with that person in a few weeks and share your excitement for what you're working on as well as the progress that you're making. Thank you for sharing this time with me. Thank you for developing yourselves, and I look forward to hearing more about the exciting professional development opportunities that you are doing around the world. Bye for now.